Taria Tepe.
Tepe is
Imbeleko leyo.
tepe is an antelope.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so they used to use the skin
Oh,
of an antelope to create umbeleko.
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's why they call it taria tepe.
To create imbeleko, what do you mean?
Well, angithi, for example, once the baby is born and then the baby usuyaphila yazini uyakhasa whatever and mamteta nalento le yokuteta le bayibiza thari. Yeah,
Mm.
that's why kune isake sithi kathi usuthi bari ngwana ya sale ngwishwela tharing umntwana ongakhala ufele embelekweni.
Yes, yes, yes. That's
So
my one of my favorite sayings. Uh-huh.
makho so lo mbeleko lo babawuyenza ngesikhumba eh sempunzi.
That's so beautiful.
Yes, so that's why
That's
bari
so
tharia
beautiful.
tepe
Thank you, thank you, thank you,
impala.
thank you, thank
Makho
you, thank you for making my
makho
mind rich. Hey,
makho.
Pelusenza clever. So is it 8 o'clock
Oh, I think
on
better.
the?
I think bona
I've
ukuthi
gone live already, Dr. Zulu, because you were giving me a lesson there and I wanted to share.
oh, I
So I
see.
must
Okay,
warn you.
kulungile ke masiqhubeke ke. Masiqhubeke.
Ngakubega, I see there are
Yeah.
people in the room already. So good
Okay.
morning to everyone. You're getting good mornings already from Umanda saying, my beloved Dr. Zulu
Ah,
Matabo, thanks
makhosi.
sis for bringing such an intelligent man,
Uh,
Makosi. So it means that the people are ready. Good morning, Dr. Zulu. We are
thank
starting
you. Good
the
morning.
Christian people. It's the Christian People's New Year. It's the first episode of the Christian People's New Year. So, as we had said, we're doing part two of Christmas, Christianity, and colonialism, just so that
Yes,
we bring them back and we recode people's DNAs because there are things to unlearn. Dr. Zulu,
yes.
as always, I do put your university details in the description box at the end of our session. So when people want to reach out to you, I will put your
Makhosi.
details there at the bottom. And I know that there are some crowdfunding initiatives that you're working on, and people must definitely reach out to you and see where they can also help because we have to grow
Makhosi.
the indigenous knowledge pool system. So I'm going to hand over to you. We're going to
Yeah.
jump straight from where we were last time.
Yes.
The first that question was, where does Santa Claus come from?
Thank you very much. No, thank you very much, my honorable Sister Ntsiki, and also your honorable erudite audience, followers. So we are very much honored to be on this esteemed platform, and also I would say effervescent platform. There's a lot of effervescence, with the great sister Ntsiki. So yeah, we need that energy, very important, you see. And I'm also full of effervescence. Nine Moya Linda.
We are Eno. We are Eno.
Exactly. Yes, we are sparkling. We are
We are
bubbling.
bubbling.
That's right. So, okay. So last time where we left off, we were talking about, of course, Christianity. We were talking about Christmas, where we were explaining how Christmas came about, and then there was also a question on Santa Claus. How Santa Claus came about. So just to recap, of course, that Christmas, of course, actually there is a linguistics. I love linguistics a lot. So linguistics is part of our research at Madisebo University Research Institute. So linguistics is extremely important, and I must tell you that you must take pride in your mother tongue. Very key. If
Yeah.
you look at successful nations, like we talked about uh, China, for example, they value the language mother tongue. And remember, we talked about how they embarked on the Cultural Revolution in 1966, and they said that if Chinese are inspired by their language, their ancestors, their cultural knowledge, China will be the greatest nation on the planet. And today is the case. Now, a lot of people don't know that actually, when China began on this journey of economic revolution, China was poorer than most African countries. The leader of China who took China to this great to this economic greatness is somebody called Deng Xiaoping, who was elected, Chinese president in 1978 by the Chinese Communist Party. At that time, China's GDP per capita was $40. Imagine that. So I was looking through
What?
African countries to see the poorest countries. I think the poorest countries on the African continent would be around, let's say, between 500 and $300 per capita. China was $40. So you can
What?
see they were down there, and more than 800 million Chinese were going to bed on an empty stomach. But they changed that. Countries like India, they were like a superpower to China. But today, China's economy is more than 6 times the GDP of India. India is somewhere there around 3 trillion. China is more than 18 trillion. It's very close to the US. US is around 20 trillion. So I'm just making these comments just to underscore the fact that cultural knowledge is very key. You must not undermine that. Um, Mother tongue, you must take an interest in your language. Very, very important. Okay, so let me start off with answering the question on Santa Claus. So basically, Santa Claus comes from actually, it's associated with somebody in history who's known as Saint Bishop Nicholas, who is said to have been of a Greek heritage. And then Saint Nicholas, of course, lived in a place called Myra. Myra is a present day Turkey. Actually, it's interesting. Christianity was really created in Turkey because last time I told you about the conference of Nicaea, which took place, I think, in that was 225 AD. So that conference took place in a place called Nicaea, and Nicaea is also in Turkey. so, so if you really want to follow this history of Christianity, Turkey is very critical there. Of course, Turkey and also North Africa. We're talking about Egypt, Ethiopia and Nubia. Those countries, they are all very much involved in the history, in the early history of Christianity, that sort of stuff. So anyway, so there was this bishop called Saint Nicholas. Now he was also known by a nickname called Nick because Nicholas, the nickname will be Nick. It kind of sounds like a tautology here, but you see, no pun intended. But anyways, so now Nick in Dutch language, right? It was actually, let's say, saint in Dutch, in the old Dutch language was Sinter, you see, and then which means saint, and then Nick in Dutch language was class. So So then I think when it became anglicized, then it became Santa Claus. So that word Santa really is from Dutch, which means a saint. Santa really means a saint. And then Claus is from Dutch class, which meant Nick. You see that. So that's basically the language. And this bishop was very famous because he was I think born around 280 AD. 280 AD. So you see, so that would be about what 280 AD. Let's say it would be about I think around more than a little over 50 years after the conference of Nicaea. And he was very famous for example, doing great things to the poor people, helping people who are poor, and so forth. And then he's associated with certain miracles and stuff like that. But I think what really makes him famous also is that he was a patron of children. So he loved children a lot. So which is why Santa Claus is associated a lot with children. You see that. And then, of course, now Santa Claus today, of course, you find him and of course, Santa Claus is mostly North American because many countries like Canada, US, they use the word Santa Claus. Whereas in countries like England, South Africa, Azania, they would use the word Father Christmas. You see that. But all refers to SAP. So that answers the question on how where Santa Claus comes from and how Santa Claus, came about. And of course, we did say also that Christmas came as a result of declaration, and of course, the word Christmas, Christ meaning Christ, and then Mass meaning the Eucharist, meaning the ritual, or the Lord's Supper. And that used to be celebrated in spring, which was around in March. And that's why you still have things called Easter today. But then there was that Pope Julius who issued a decree that Christmas must now be celebrated on 25 December. And of course, the rest is history. And the purpose of doing that was to basically try to extend the Roman influence, Roman power over what the Romans called the pagan ritual. Because pagans were the non Romans, people like Africans, indigenous people who used to celebrate the sun, especially on the African continent. We have a very strong spirituality about the sun. We have, for example, among the Basu, my mother is a Msutu, so Basutu, they have a deity called Rama Seidi, which comes from the word of God, Ra. Seidi is the light of the sun, and then Basutu call themselves Sichaba, meaning the nation, but that word Sichaba is also from the sun. So basically, the word Sichaba means the nation of the sun. And then, of course, I lived in Botswana. There are people there on northern Botswana who are called Makalanga. Makalanga comes from the expression Bagalanga, meaning the people of the sun. You see that? So we are the people of the sun. So Ra, Masedi. So Ra is the sun god. You see that? But remembering very fundamental principles there that the deities in African spirituality, they are always in twins. So they follow the sacred principle of twinness. You see that? So very, very critical there. You see. So for example, Ra is a twin to another deity called Di. Di is the god of amniotic fluid. You see. So that's why that word Rama came. And then, of course, I've added another deity there called Ma, who is a feminine god. Actually, D is a feminine god, and Ma also is a feminine god. And then, of course, Ra is a masculine god. So it's quite interesting that uh, the femininity is highly venerated in African spirituality. Very, very key there. You see that. And the reason femininity is highly celebrated is because the African ancients understood that, the universe is governed by the feminine principle. If you look at animals like elephants, the leader is a woman. The bosses of the elephant is gonna be Rahadi, Babegazi, which is the aunt, Omalume, all those people. And the same thing applies to animals called Impisi, Pirika Sesotho, in English, hyena. You see the hyena, the leader of the hyena is a woman, is a lady. Very important. So hyenas are a feminine society. And it's very interesting that, as I was talking about the sun, so in the Sesotho cosmology, right? Um, so when that's in the morning, they say Hussein, which means exhale in the morning. And then during the day they will use the word Motihari, Motihari. And notice that there is red. That red comes from Ra, and Ra is the sun god. And then of course at 12, ki harampa yam tiar, meaning in the middle of the sun. But check this out. Just after 12, they call it Hupiri Mahalitza. You see, that means the sun is now preparing itself towards sunset. But check this out. That word Pirima is associated with the animal, Piri, the hyena. So in the Sesotho cosmology, the hyena is associated with the sunset because hyena is a nocturnal animal. You see that? So once the sun sets, then it wakes up and they go hunting and stuff like that. But one of the reasons they celebrate that animal is because of the feminine power. Because if you were to Google, I've written a number of articles on this question of this animal. So if you were to Google Zulumathabo, then you write hyena, you'll come across articles that I've written on that animal. So very, very important. And even the children of this animal, they are also venerated by virtue of their mother. So I just wanted to make that point. And in fact, most of the members of the hyena animal are women. And then you've got men also who are members there, and who are there really to defend this feminine system. You see that? And even when the hyenas fight with lions, the one who is in front is a woman who will charge at the lions. And these hyenas, they go ballistic at that point. So, so I just making those remarks to say that the feminine principle is very important. And that's why patriarchy is actually, it's not an African phenomenon, it's a European phenomenon. European societies are very patriarchal. And you can even tell in terms of language, you know. And I think I did make an example at some point that if I'm talking to a woman and then I'm making a report at sea, I'll say something like, I spoke to her, and her being the pronoun that specifies the gender. In Sotho language, if I was making a reporter's speech, I would say, I spoke to Yena. Yena is a pronoun that does not specify the gender. You see that? Because this is a non-sexist culture. But of course, patriarchy came to the African continent via Christianity, which is why we're talking about Christianity and colonialism. So Christianity came and then it brought with it the patriarchal traditions of Europe. And of course, colonialism also is the same thing, right? Okay, so I think I've answered the question on Santa Claus, and I've made some highlights, some recap on on Christmas. Now I want to get into the colonialism of Christianity. So now, if you really want to understand the colonial origin of Christianity, look no further than the New Testament. The New Testament is an official textbook of the ECC. You see, Euro Christian colonialism. That's it. Um, because, and I'm going to tell you why I say that. Um, for example, the Middle East. So we're talking about, especially Judea, Samaria, Galilee, Syria, and so forth. These, and of course, part of North Africa as well. These countries were first colonized by the Greeks. Right. So, you already remember in school, they always tell us about Alexander the Great. So Alexander was the Greek, of course, and then he's the one who defeated a lot of nations. But it's interesting, he defeated also Egypt, but he could not defeat Nubia. And it's interesting because I was just talking about feminine power here. Nubia is a kingdom that was ruled exclusively by women. And these women were called Kandega. Kandega is a title, is a royal title. Now the Romans, then they Romanized they Romanized the name Kandega to become Kende. So today we've got popular English names like Candace with an A, and then we've got also Candice with an I. Those are African names actually, even though today people who carry these names are English women, but actually these are African names. They come from the original name called Kandega. So those women, Kandega or Candace, they confronted Alexander the Great when he wanted to defeat Nubia. In my book called The Sacred Knowledge of the Desert, African Philosophical Transcendence, I do explain that fact there. So you must look out for that book. So where I explain that the Alexander, he had to retreat from these Nubian armies that were commanded by these women. Okay. Now, back on the aspect of the New Testament and colonialism. So the Greeks were the first people to impose colonial rule in the Middle East, and then the Jews from Judea were very, very rebellious, along with other people from Galilee, Samaria, and so forth. But the most rebellious were the Jews from Judea. So what happened then is that when the Jews realized that these Greeks are very entrenched, they then went to Italy, to Rome, where they asked for military help from Rome. And the Romans came and supported them in their uprising against the Greeks, and the Greeks were defeated by the Romans. Now, when the Romans kicked out the Greeks, then the Romans said, no, now we are the new rulers here. You're going to have to pay tax to us and answer to us. So that's how Rome becomes the new colonial empire of the Middle East, which include, of course, North Africa. And so now, because the Romans were, because the Jews were very, very rebellious. In fact, of all the colonies that were under Roman Empire, I think the most troublesome was Judea. So what the Romans did, they established a regional headquarters in Syria, and then from there, they built a very huge military base, I think it's called Caesarea, in Judea. And the purpose of that military base was to respond to any anti-colonial resistance, any anti-colonial insurgency, right? Because at that time, they had what they call messianic movement. You see, you need to understand what this word Messiah means. It does not mean what your church tells you. Messiah actually in Jewish tradition means a military commander, a military leader, a military emancipator, a liberator. So now the Jews had these messianic movements, and these messianic movements were there to shake off the colonial chains of the Romans. So now, and Romans came with very clever strategy. So, for example, they started embarking on the writing of the New Testament, meaning they commissioned writers to write. In fact, uh, there's a very interesting book called Caesar's Messiah. Must look for that book. Caesar's Messiah, Caesar being the Roman emperor, Caesar's Messiah. And that book talks about, the writer of the book is Joseph Atwill, who is actually a Roman Catholic. And then he came with this very revolutionary thesis that the New Testament, so he confirms that New Testament was written by the Romans. And basically the idea behind the New Testament was to suppress colonial rebellion. Very, very important. And I did say to you last time that there are a couple of expressions used in the New Testament. For example, there's a lot of text, chapters and verses about demons. You see that? And demonic spirits, where they say, this person has demonic spirits. And I did explain to you that the word demonic spirit doesn't mean what your church tells you. In the Roman era, demonic spirit meant anti-colonial resistance, anti-Roman activity. So if you disagree with the Romans, if you oppose the Roman colonial administration, you were labeled to be having a demonic spirit. You see that? And I gave you an example of a chapter in Matthew where Jesus Christ is on a boat through the Sea of Galilee, and he disembarks on the boat, and then he comes to this village, and then there is a man there who is reported to be having demonic spirits. And this man was also bound with chains. You see, that chain is a symbol. So he's bound with chains. And then when this man sees Jesus, he says, have you come to judge us before the time? And Jesus says, who are you? And then the voice says, we are a legion. In fact, the voice is the plural. We are a legion. And then from there, the request says, can you cast us into the pig? And of course, Jesus cast them into the pig. And then the Bible says the pigs went down the hill and drowned in the sea. Now, this book I just told you, Caesar's Messiah by Joseph Atwell, he goes into details about that story of those demonic spirits. That actually that chapter is talking about a battle that took place between the Messianic movement and the Roman soldiers. But it is put in such a coded way that when you read it, you are not going to get the idea. You are just simply going to say, oh, this man has got demonic spirits. He was cast into, the spirits were cast into pigs, and then, they drowned. No, it was a serious military battle, sorry, which had taken place between the Messianic movement and the Roman soldiers. And of course, the Messianic movement, they were defeated in that battle. They were defeated in that battle, and a lot of them drowned in the Sea of Galilee. They were killed, they were massacred very cruelly. You see. Now, when the official writers of the New Testament, when they write that story, now they were told that they must camouflage the story. They should just say, this is a man with demonic spirits and stuff like that. And when you read that chapter, it tells you, it says, when the man says to Jesus, when Jesus asks, who are you? And the man says, we are a legion because we are many. The Matthew tells you, it says that there were more than, I think, 2,000 demonic spirits. So those thousands of demonic spirits, those were the anti-colonial fighters. Those were the insurgents. Those were militants who fought to the death to take off the chains of colonialism. So it's very important for you to understand that the New Testament is a colonial text under the Roman rule, and which explains why in the land of Azania, South Africa, when you go to a hotel, you're gonna find, when you open the drawer in the hotel, there's a copy of the New Testament. Every hotel. I've never been to a hotel where I never found the copy of the New Testament. And you ask yourself a question, why? Because this rule of the Bible in the hotel came with the British Empire. And it remained like that even under the apartheid government. Even today, we are talking post-1994, we still have that. But you see, our political leaders, they don't have the insight. So they don't see the connection between the New Testament and colonial conquest. So, which is why it's very important for you to understand that the New Testament is not just a holy book that is a religious text that is gonna save your soul. No, it is a text that is designed to miseducate you about reality. One example I'll give also on this question is that somewhere, this is also in Matthew, there is a Jesus Christ is busy healing the sick. And while he's healing the sick, it says a centurion comes. And the centurion says to Jesus, says, Master, now depending on the version you are reading, some version will say Master, and some version will say Lord. Now, this is where linguistics becomes important. So you must ask yourself, what is the etymology of master? What is the etymology of Lord? Well, basically, they're the same thing. So master is somebody that is a slave owner. It's somebody who has power on of others. That is the master. And the same applies to the Lord. The Lord also is a slave owner. He's got power over the life of others. The difference is that a master is an ordinary slave master, whereas Lord comes from the royal family, like, the royalty and stuff like that. And that's important because when you look at British history of slavery, there is a ship, the first ship that is associated with Atlantic slave trade that was commissioned by Queen Elizabeth I. And guess what is the name of the ship? The name of the ship is Jesus. You know that? Must Google that. There is a ship called Jesus. And this ship is a slave ship. It was in the maybe around 1562, 63, something like that. So that particular ship carried slaves from all the way from Africa, West Africa, all the way to the Caribbean, to the Americas. You see that? And that ship was called Jesus. And then it was chartered by Queen Elizabeth I, and the person who was responsible, who owned the ship, was somebody called John Hawkins, who's an Englishman. So there is a connection between Jesus and slavery, Jesus and colonialism. Very important. Okay, now I wanted to make an example about this text in Matthew that talks about Jesus Christ was busy healing the sick. And then a centurion comes and he says, Master, and as I say, depending on the version you read, another one will say, Lord, uh, my servant is sick at home. I would like you to heal him. And Jesus responds by saying, I will come to your house to heal your servant once I'm finished healing these people. And then the centurion says, Master, you do not have to come to my house. You see me, I'm a centurion. I'm a master over me. I've got slaves, I've got servants. When I say to my slaves, do this, they do. When I say to my servants, go there, they go. Therefore, even you, master, just send a word, and I know my servant will be healed. And the Bible says, Jesus was amazed at the faith of the centurion. And Jesus said, of all the children of Israel, there is no one with a greater faith than the centurion. And then from there, the Bible says, Jesus says, according to your faith, your servant is healed. And the Bible says, the servant was healed instantly. So that's what the Bible says. Now let's decode that, because things are written in a coded language. So to begin with, centurion. What is a centurion? So a centurion is a military commander of 100 regiment soldiers. So he's a commander of an army that numbers hundreds of. That's why the word century is also means hundred, because century during the Roman period was a military regiment called century. And of course, in that story I was talking about the demonic spirit, in that particular case, uh, in that particular case, sorry, Siswami, there is that noise in the background. Are you able to ubachele ukuthi
Yes, actually, they did mention, Guti, there's a bit of feedback on your side, but I didn't want to disturb.
okay, it's coming from my side.
I think so. Is there something on, or you got
No,
anything? Even me, I've got nothing on. So,
yeah,
guys, just apologies, guys, about the sound this morning.
sorry about that.
Um, yeah, but
Okay,
I think we
maybe
can hear you.
let me check. Let me check. Hopefully, I don't lose the connection. Hey, and you see now. Just hold on, please.
No problem.
Yeah.
Guys, is it at least audible? Please let us know there in the comment section that at least, and apologies for the sound. Um, but Doc is gonna. I was hearing it on his end. I don't know if it's
Okay.
on my end.
Um, is it quiet
Is it?
now? It's still there.
Let's see. Somebody might answer us in the
Okay.
audience.
Okay.
But I think you
Okay.
can continue because we
Okay,
do
Makos.
only have 15 minutes left.
Okay, Thomas Makos. Yeah. So,
Okay.
so now a centurion is a military commander, and the purpose of centurion is to enforce the brutal colonial administration of the Romans. So, meaning that anyone who resists the colonial rule of the Romans is brutalized by the centurion and his soldiers. So, a lot of Jewish resistors were brutalized and killed by the centurion and his military soldiers. So when this centurion comes to Jesus and says, Master, I want you to heal my servant, Jesus would have said something like, no, you can't come to me, you brutalize my people. But Jesus does not do that. Number two, the centurion calls Jesus Master/Lord. Jesus should have said, I do not own slaves, so you can't call me Master or Lord. But Jesus does not do that. And then the third point, Jesus says, and check this out, the centurion makes it a point that Jesus understands the context, because the centurion says, Master, you don't need to come to my house. You see me, I own slaves, I own servants. When I say to the slave, do this, they do. When I say to the servants, go there, they go. So even you, Master, you can just send a word, and I know my servant will be healed. So Jesus understands the context. This man owns slaves. So Jesus was supposed to rebuke him and says, no, you are not allowed, you are not allowed to own slaves, something like that. But he does not do that. So that's just an example. And check this out. He praises the centurion instead of rebuking him. He says, the Bible says, Jesus was amazed at the faith of the centurion. And he said, of all the children of Israel, there is no one with a greater faith than the centurion. So, in other words, the centurion is better than my people, right? And yet Jesus knows that his people have been brutalized by the centurion. You see there. So I'm making this point for you to understand that you need a different lens to understand the connection between Christianity and colonialism. So now, when you read the New Testament, you find that there are actually three sects there. There's people who are called the Pharisees, that's one sect. There's another sect of people who are called priests, who are also known as the Sadducees. So Sadducees, they are priests. And then you've got also the scribes, who are also known as the essence. So the Pharisees, they come from the tradition of Moses. They are the Mosaic tradition. They are the largest sect in the Jewish society. And then from there, you've got the Sadducees, the priests. Those come from the Solomon Temple tradition. So these are the priests. And very, yes. And then of course the third one are the writers, the scribes. The people who wrote, for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls. So those are the essence, which were discovered, of course, in Egypt. Actually, they were discovered in Egypt. These Dead Sea Scrolls. And check this out: the Dead Sea Scrolls are not part of the New Testament because the Romans would not allow this, would not allow the Dead Sea Scrolls to be part of the New Testament text. You see that all things that have to do with resistance, anti-colonial resistance, are not part of the New Testament. You see there. Very, very important. So now the Pharisees actually, they are the people who carry the indigenous knowledge of the Jews, right? So meaning if you want to know things like rituals, Mbelego, Tari, and so forth, the Pharisees were the people to go to. And then, and then now the Sadducees, the priests, it's very interesting that they are a minority. They were actually the elite. And also the priests, the Sadducees, they did not even speak Jewish language. They spoke Greek. But remember, the Greeks were the first colonizers. So the Sadducees are people who went to these Greek schools, they speak Greek language. Just like today, in South Africa, you've got people who do not speak the African language, they speak English or they speak Afrikaans or something like that. So the Sadducees were those kinds of people who specialized in Greek language, which explains why the New Testament is not written in Latin, is also not written in Hebrew, it is written in Greek, because the Romans were trying to appeal to to the Sadducees, you see. But now those who were always disagreeing, they were demonized. So, for example, the Pharisees in the New Testament, they are cast in a very negative light, right? Because the Pharisees are the one who carry the indigenous knowledge, the cultural knowledge. You can read from Matthew, which is the first book, to Revelation. They are all demonized. Even the Sadducees, those who do not agree with the Romans, they are also demonized. Even the scribes, they are demonized. So those people that you see there, they are the ones who disagreed with the Romans, and they're demonized. They are cast. And even Jesus, he is the leader in demonizing them. He will make an example, says, don't be like Pharisees and stuff like that. So basically, the New Testament was written by the Romans. And as I say, there's a very interesting book you should read called it says Jesus
Caesar's Messiah.
Messiah. Yes, Jesus Messiah by Joseph Atwell.
As well.
He goes into details about that. Sime kanjani ngesikhathi sisumuhle?
We've got a smallanyana 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes left.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay. So
I don't
maybe
know if you.
singabula. Yeah, Kobeka this
Yeah.
one.
No, I was actually going to listen to you, Guti. What do you suggest?
Yeah, mhlambe we can allow some questions or comments or something like that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. You know, guys, I forgot to take my other phone, so now my eyesight is struggling here. But
Oh,
Magat
sorry.
was saying, and the Khan's people, even today, they are keeping the Centurion faith, and you can see with their clothes, and they like to be called masters.
Mm,
So she's talking about the Khan's people.
okay.
There's a lot of positive vibrations, mainly in the comment sections. Guys, do you have actual questions?
Mm,
Um, I'll see if they've got any actual questions. Sorry, guys, I forgot to bring my other phone. Um, but I don't see. Yeah, Tabura saying here anti colonial fighters, demonic spirits, New Testament keys. Oh, yeah, colonialism.
mm,
Sakhathwa sabethwa nkosi yami.
mm.
Text designed to miseducate us about reality. Makhosi
Mm.
amahle. Vukani
Marco.
Moya
Mm.
wesizwe.
Yeah, Marco. Marco.
I'm so glad you told me about that because I'd always heard about Guti, you should actually more focus on the Old Testament, but I didn't
Yeah.
understand why they were saying that. So today's
Mm.
lecture really helped us put into context because I think there's always a conflict when they say that the Bible is African stories. So the Christians always
Mm.
argue that these are our stories actually, and
Yeah.
it's important for us to make that distinction, Guti. Yeah, it's our stories, but they were bastardized. And
Exactly. Yeah.
in the New Testament, though our stories are being used to oppress us and to subjugate us and to make us mutable to them. And it's so
Mm.
funny because when you were speaking, you were reminding me of how RET, like in politics now, how
Mm.
RET has been demonized. So when you
Mm.
want radical economic transformation, you're demonized, which is the same
Yeah.
as you had demonic spirits.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, Kajen is just thanking for the lesson. Bayatogoza,
Mm.
they thanking you for the information, Dr. Zulu.
Marco. Marco.
And yeah, so now you'll let us know which Tuesday you're coming again so we
Yeah.
can make our poster and be ready for you. As usual, I'll
Marco.
put all the details in the box. But
Mm.
that was a healthy lesson. We've had more than.
Yeah.
We will unpack it and we will get Guy Caesar's Messiah by Joseph
Mm.
Atwell is today's reading, if you can find it. Dr. Zulu, thank you very, very much. I don't know if you've got any goodbye thoughts.
Oh, yes, Marcos. No, no. Just want to thank very much. Thanks for those positive vibrations, those great comments. So basically, it's very important that you must return to the source. You must remember where you come from, and I would basically say that, you must talk to the elders within your family, your neighborhood, go to the village, and get stories and also language. Pay a lot of attention to language. Language has got a lot of information. For example, let's take something like a path in English language, a path. In Sotho, it's called Tsila. In Zulu, Nguni language, it will be Ndlela. And then in the English language, path, it just means a path. There's nothing special there. But in Sesotho, Tsila, so there is a affix there called Tsi. In the Sotho language, any word that has Tsi is referring to sensing. And it's the same in Nguni languages. Ntle is about sensing as in indlebe, and it's a Sotho tsi as in tlebe, which is a sensing organ. So now it's called tsila because when the ant walks on the path, it leaves a chemical scent. And other ants that come on that path, they'll pick up the scent and say, "Whoa, omkhonazi bahambe la, bomfokeng ba tsamaile mona, le rona re tla tsamaya mona." You see that? That's why they call it tsela. You see, that's why babiza indlela ngoba uyezwa ngephunga ukuthi omkhonazi abahambe la. So our language is very rich. So I want you to think about that and try to be a student of indigenous language. So siyathokoza makhosi amahle.
Thank you very much. You let us know what our next lecture is and which Tuesday it
Makhosi.
is.
Okay,
Enkosi
siyathokoza
kakhulu.
makhosi.
Thank you everybody for joining. Please like, share, and subscribe. The podcast is doing so well, guys. Thank you so much for all your support. Have a beautiful, beautiful week, and we'll see you next time. We do have episodes coming out on Sunday. We've got Gogo Mukhadi in the evening doing our African calendar, and then on Sunday morning we're discussing Istrito with Gogo Tuli. So thank you so much, guys. Have a beautiful one. Thanks, Dr. Zulu. Everyone's thanking you in the comment section.
Siyathokoza makhosi amahle.
Enkosi.
Siyathokoza.